If I had coined the phrase Christian nationalism, what that would mean would be the utter acceptance of minorities, women, that everybody had equal rights. It would mean that we tax the rich, that we give to the poor, that we set up that nobody goes hungry, that public education and healthcare, that everybody has a right to these things. This is what real Christianity to me looks like. What's up, y'all? Welcome back to the Before You Speak podcast. I am your host, Derek Peterson. Just processing the fire hose of my news feed with this guy over here, which last time I pointed the wrong direction. So we'll see if this works again this time.
Hey, everybody. I am Elvin. I don't actually know what side I am on because I listened to this on Apple Podcasts. And the fire hose of my news feed, I'm depressed, man. It's not good. It's really feeling overwhelming and not good. And this morning I was like, fuck, man, like this is really not great. But you, by the way, you look great. Look at the shirt, the haircut, man. You are looking sharp.
Well, thank you. This is what happens when I close a few transactions and I can get back to like paying for normal, like hygienic type things again.
Taking showers,
taking showers, shaving, cleaning up my hair a little bit. Yeah, it happens. So, no, spring real estate season is a real thing and it's been busy, but, yeah, let's jump into the news today. I think we should start with what's going on in Virginia right now as the FBI is searching, Virginia Senate leader's office. It's a corruption probe, which is I put those in quotations because it's honestly some horse shit. Because Luis Lucas, this Senate leader, was the one that was really vocal about gerrymandering their maps as a result of what's been going on across the country, specifically I also saw a clip of JD Vance talking and basically using the left's talking point of like, well, if the Democrats are just going to do it in all these blue cities, then we've got to do the same thing. And I'm like, God, dude, this is going to get out of hand. This is going to get insane. And not only that, like they're using now their power, they're using the FBI as a clearly political targets. Like at least prior to this, at least we kind of tried to hide it a little bit. And now they're not even trying to hide it. Like this is awful. This is literally a threat to democracy. So,
yeah, I don't see much of a way to distinguish what they're doing in Virginia now to what, fucking Putin does to some of his political opponents. She's the one who was on record saying, you started it, we're going to fucking finish it. That's her quote. And the cuss word is in it. She was, very, very forward about what the Democrats in Virginia should do in response to what the Texas Republicans did. And as a result, now she's got the full weight of the FBI and the federal government going through her stuff. And like, nobody heard of any corruption allegations beforehand. It's almost impossible to not see this as just completely made up stuff, right? And it is lawfare. It is fascism. Like look, I have my thoughts about that we're going in a fascist direction, but it's like this is an instance where it's like, bro, you have to call this what it is. It's
So well, the thing that gets me about all this stuff is just that, dude, if you look at anybody hard enough, right? Like if you look at any business, you look at any person's life down to the detail and you just start to probe, you're going to find stuff that they do wrong. You're going to find areas where it's human nature, where people cut corners, where, like my wife just got her second free Starbucks birthday drink because the app didn't cancel out her Starbucks thing, and we spend God knows how much money at Starbucks every year. So she was like, hey, the app still gave me a free one for my birthday. And I was like, whatever, we pay them. But I'm like, dude, this is life. Like sometimes we do shit that it's like, yeah, is it the right thing? No, but like it happened, and like if you get probed, like yeah, and I think you see it. You if you're retroactively just like going after people, you're probably going to be able to find some shit on them. You're
But
probably
that's
going to
not
be
even the
fine.
point. That's not
Yeah,
even the point of it, right? The point of it is the
the fear
lawfare,
tactic.
is the use of the federal government, is the use of the FBI to simply intimidate and overrun political opponents. That's all
Yeah,
this is. Whether they find, a free drink from Starbucks or, something ex post facto that she did wrong is not the point. The point is they don't like what she pulled, so they
yeah,
are now unleashing federal law enforcement upon her. And that in and of itself, it doesn't matter what they find. It's what they look. We haven't heard boo from the Fulton County District, from the Fulton County Elections Commission, right? Comey was indicted, and it was dismissed once. He's been indicted again. Letitia James, the case was dismissed. The sandwich thrower thing in D.C., the case was dismissed.
yeah,
All these cases are getting dismissed. They're all bullshit. It's not the point of these cases is not do they have merit, even the seed of merit. The point is that it is intimidation. It is a throttling of a democratic system. That's
yeah.
what's going on here.
And it sets the precedent for the future. You know, like even if the pendulum swings, and even if we do get elections and things change in the next few years, we're setting a precedent now for, you know, all of the political, corruption and the use of government agencies to go after your political opponents. Like this is stuff that dictators, this is stuff that Russia, Putin, and China do. Like this wasn't the U.S., and it's creeping in slowly enough that I mean, and I'm not saying that this wasn't like we're innocent in all of this. I'm saying relative to the size of our country and how insane of an operation it is to run the United States of America, we've actually done a pretty good job with it over the last 50, I mean since I've been alive. This is the most terrifying moment I think in all of that. And it's an interesting time because I'm an adult. This stuff matters to me now, and it matters to me because I have kids that I want to see. I have kids that I dream about the American dream for them. Like, like I didn't make it as far. I made it, I think, farther along than my parents did. And my hope and prayer for my kids is that they make it, that their life is a little bit better than mine, and like that's the hope, right? And it kind of feels like that opportunity is not going to be there for them at the moment.
Yeah, it's getting harder and harder to see a clean way out of this, and
Yeah.
that's what's troubling. And like I know that what the right says is like, well, you did this to Trump, you started this. Like, no, fuck off with that, please, because Trump has boxes and boxes and boxes of classified documents out in the open at Mar-a-Lago, right? Trump is on tape in a phone call saying, find me 11,781 votes. Trump was found guilty by a jury. Doesn't matter if it's New York, doesn't matter where. He was found guilty by a jury of 34 different felonies, right? A judge said this was Trump has sexually assaulted someone. All this shit, like you can tie, hey, Trump, we have him doing this. Of course we should go after him. We don't have anything on this woman. There's no reason to go after her except for politics. And,
Yeah.
this ties back into the gerrymandering stuff, which we talked about last week. And that, we have to tap on that decision again because I don't think that I fully appreciated just how awful the response to this decision would be. The hoods are off in
Yeah.
Republican state legislatures. They are no longer hiding at all that what they are doing is, in the case of Louisiana, stopping an election that's already in progress. 42,000 people have already voted in that primary election. They are stopping that election in order to draw out away any district that is represented by a minority. Tennessee, Alabama, in Indiana, 5 of the 7 state senators that voted against redistricting were voted out or lost their primaries last night. The
Yeah.
hoods are off. There is no pretense at all anymore in these Republican states that what they are doing is not partisan gerrymandering. They're not even saying it. They're saying we are districting away VRA, Voting Rights Act districts that were created in order to comply with the Voting Rights Act because there was racial gerrymandering. They were racially gerrymandering minorities out. They're saying we're getting rid of these districts. We want all white districts all the time. It's and it's at least a decade before you can come back from that and set the ship right, because you have to have the Democrats take over in 2026. You have to have them put forth legislation, which is going to get vetoed by Donald Trump. So you have to have them take the White House and hold the House and hold the Senate in 2028. Then you can sign legislation. Then that'll get challenged in like the Fifth Circuit of Texas, where they'll overturn the legislation. It'll take 4 years to work its way up to the Supreme Court, unless, of course, all the nut jobs are still on the Supreme Court, in which case it'll take 4 fucking days to get to the Supreme Court so they can overturn that legislation. All in the meantime, and I'm cooking right now because it's so much stuff. All in the meantime, Democrats have to start taking over state legislatures so that they can redraw maps in a manner that fairly represents the population of the state, which includes representation for people of color. That's not an anti-democratic statement to make, that there should be representation for people of color. And this fucking court decision from last week just completely eviscerates any protection for that would ensure that.
Because racism's dead, bro. It
Yeah.
doesn't exist anymore.
I saw a thing. I've always been sort of impressed that for racism to exist nowadays, you basically have to like drop the N-word. Short of that, it's not racist, right? It's like that's where the pendulum is swung. But remember Hillary Clinton said, in the 2016 election, she's like, 47% of this people votes for Trump, and some of them I just put in the basket of deplorables, and everybody freaked out, and very quickly it became like an opportunity to show just how deplorable you are. It became it. She gave them. Who could have thought? I wouldn't have predicted this. Who would think that that statement gave them license to be like, oh, she already thinks I'm deplorable, so I'm just going to be a full-on racist asshole because
Yeah.
she already called me out on it. So hey, okay, cool. Like I said at the beginning, hoods are off, and it's fucking scary, and I don't see a way out of it for years and years and years.
Yeah. It is terrifying. It sucks. And I would agree with you. I guess I'm still hoping for some decency. And the hardest part about this is there's so many, like, there's so much ignorance in this process because information is just spread out and people's algorithms and silos are so different from one another. And it sucks because, like, I don't know how you could be a minority in a minority group and be okay with any of this. Like, I don't know how, but yet you still see it. You still see, Black and brown people advocating for this stuff. And I'm like, you're advocating your own rights away. Like, the shittiest part about all of this is that, like, for guys like me and you, and you less than me because you're Jewish. I'm just a run of the mill white guy that claims to be a Christian, which we'll get into later. But like, yeah, like this stuff is kind of built for me and guys like me. And, it fucking sucks. It fucking sucks to see that, what is so plainly, clearly happening, that people have found a way to make the narrative even something slightly different, and people will still believe it. And I'm like, man, it's just insane to me. But yeah, I think the feeling of hopelessness is it's getting hard. To be honest, it's even getting harder to look at my news feed. I go through seasons of this, but yeah, last 2 days it's been really tough to even pull up social media apps and try to read through them, because I'll notice myself literally getting anxiety and getting angry as I'm going through my news feed. And I'm like, man, this is ruining my evening. Like, I need to stop.
Yeah.
You know?
There's another point to this that I probably should have brought up last week, but I didn't. it's important because we don't hate the Supreme Court enough, so we should fucking talk about hating the Supreme Court more.
That is the worst.
It is the worst, right? And so there's this principle in election kind of Supreme Court discourse called the Purcell principle. Purcell is the name of a case that says that the Supreme Court basically will say, we're invoking the Purcell principle and we're not going to mess with election districts in this case when it's too close to an election, right? That's going to cause too much upheaval. We're going to table this until later. Okay, so because of Purcell says we should allow these elections to happen without interfering, and it's too close, right? It's a brake pedal. The Purcell principle. So in December, when they overturned the Texas court, and you had Texas primaries 3 months away, they said the Purcell principle doesn't apply. There's enough time. We don't care. You know, 3 months is plenty of time, and that was in opposition to what stuff they had said before. Well, on Tuesday, they finalized the ruling that they made last week. Now, normally that doesn't happen for 32 days. It's just kind of procedural rule. A Supreme Court case isn't finalized for 32 days because parties might want to make a brief to make a change. It never is effective. It doesn't matter. But, you know, they came out and they said, nope, this decision, we're finalizing this decision now, 6 days after it was made, which, like, the elections are that day. Wouldn't the Purcell principle dictate that you say, hey, no, we're not finalizing these maps, Louisiana. Sorry that those 32 days put it after the primary, but it's just such rank partisanship. And Justice Jackson called out Alito. It was an unsigned decision. She wrote a dissent, which sometimes happens, and she just blasted them for just rank partisan hackery.
Yeah.
So Alito got his panties all up in a twist and wrote a concurrence to respond to her dissent, where he basically was like, he didn't defend at all what he did. He just said
that, which is par for the course with every Republican now. Like
right.
It's indefensible. So now, just rather than try to like rebut or say anything, now you just attack them, right?
Right, and that's what he did. He's like, this
Fucking
dissent by her is, too much, and it's a bridge too far, and it's not nice. She was mean, and I really am upset that she was mean. The whole system has been captured, right? And we've talked about stealing elections and shit like this. And I was like, I don't think it's going to happen through the mail or through changing it. This is how the system gets stolen, right? And it starts with the Supreme Court. And fuck, man, everybody that in 2016, Hillary included, who was saying, hey, Trump's going to have an opportunity to appoint a bunch of justices because there was a seat open at the time. Yeah, people who the Bernie bros who were mad at Hillary, man, you should have fucking listened.
Yeah. Yeah, and the people that this impacts the most are the people that are, I don't know, like the most, to be honest, that are getting the most misinformation about all of this. It's like keeping people dumb and ignorant about certain things, because like I didn't know much about the Supreme Court until I've to be honest, until we started doing this podcast. I listened to Strict Scrutiny from time to time, Leah Littman's podcast, because it was part of the podcast network that I enjoy listening to, but but not enough to really fully understand what was going on, just to get like some decent understanding of like processing Supreme Court decisions and like what was going on. But yeah, like, dude, this stuff is complicated, and it's so complicated that it's really hard to track and follow unless you're as smart as you are. And most people aren't. And so we're stuck in this place where we're like, wait, who's saying what? And what's true, and should I be paying attention to this? Does this matter? How is this going to impact me? How is this going to impact my kids? Like all this stuff. And it's really hard to put your finger on that pulse at all if you aren't really engaged in the understanding of how all this stuff works. So yeah, this is a shitty situation, and we're living in some scary times. So, well, you want to jump into our topic for the day?
It's not going to be less scary, but sure.
It's not. It is absolutely not.
Not turning to a comedy.
I mean, we can make it that if you want. I mean, Doug Wilson is kind of a comedy. But actually, that interview with him and Sam Harris was, if for anybody listening to this, that podcast was actually relatively educational, but probably a little more friendly to Doug Wilson than he deserves. And we'll talk a little bit about that. But today we're going to talk about Christian nationalism. So at a basic level, Christian nationalism is the belief that a nation, specifically the United States, should be defined by Christianity and its through its laws, culture, identity. They should all basically reflect Christian values. So for me, part of the thought of Christian nationalism, if you would have talked to me in my 20s, I probably would have been all in on this because I was a Christian. I was very idealistic. I came to Christianity kind of on my own senses, and I'm going to talk a little bit about this because I think it's important. First, there's a reason why there's thousands of different Christian denominations. It's because nobody can agree on just about anything that is going on in the Bible. The Bible is interpreted so many different ways by so many different people that there is not an agreement on any of it. And so, not only are there different sections of, and denominations of Christianity, like a lot of cults and different things are born out of all of this as well. So that's one part of the context that I think is really important because you can two people can say they are Christians and believe very, very different things about how life should be lived and what that actually means. And so I think for this conversation, it's important for people to understand where I sit on the Christianity spectrum because I disagree with most of what's going on, especially in politics and how people use Christianity for their own benefit. So, I came to Christianity when I was a kid. I grew up in Utah. It was a Mormon state. We had a little Southern Baptist church that I grew up in, which I hated equally as much because, I went to church and it was Baptists all talking about how terrible the Mormons were. And then I would go to school and the Mormons were all telling me like, yeah, you're not going to get to the celestial kingdom or whatever they believe in because you're not Mormon. And so basically everybody's going to hell, according to everybody else. So I had a friend in 7th grade ask me if I, was a Christian. I was like, no, I hate going to church. And he was like, church has nothing to do with you being a Christian. Like it has everything to do with you believing in God. And I was like, oh, that's interesting. So I started to actually read the Bible myself and start to figure some of this stuff out because I was like, I'm genuinely curious. So during this journey, I started to actually read through the Bible, and at one point I started to actually tear through it. I wanted to read it cover to cover, so I did that once or twice. I read the New Testament in a bunch of different settings. Old Testament is much harder to get through, but I've read it a number of times.
That's my
And
book, man.
I know that's yours. Which is so. And where I landed on, and this is why I will still claim to be a Christian today. Christianity in a nutshell is the belief that Jesus was the prophet that fulfilled the Old Testament. So like the Old Testament is this cycle of the Israelites, fucking things up, going to God giving them a set of rules, then them not being able to live by those rules, them getting punished, and then the cycle starts again, right? It's actually a really beautiful picture of human nature, which is why I was drawn to it. I was like, man, yeah, like I totally get that. And then, Jesus comes along and Jesus is like, actually, there's only two things that are important, like loving God and loving your neighbor. And there's nothing you can do to actually earn heaven. Heaven is a gift. It's grace. It's given to you because of your belief and your connection with God. This to me was like life-changing because I was like, man, that is beautiful. But in that exact thing creates the Old Testament conundrum again. Whereas there's this really weird thing with Christianity in that if you are a real Christian and you have a relationship with God and you believe it, your life will be transformed. You and the people that I know that are actually real Christians are some of the most genuinely kind, polite, caring people. These are the people that will give and you'll never know about it. These are the people that will, you know, go to great lengths to do amazing things to help other people, other cultures, everything. And I know that there's people that do this without Christianity. I'm talking specifically with inside Christianity, which is what I was drawn towards. But there's also there a world where people see that happening and they replicate the behavior without the relationship. And this is where Christianity gets off, because if your life is transformed because of a relationship with God and you're doing amazing things as a result of that, that's Christianity lived out. If you're doing amazing things in the world to gain favor with God in hopes to get to heaven, that's the opposite of what Jesus was about. Jesus was about inclusion, about equality. Like it's all through the New Testament. And so that's what drew me into Christianity. When I read Christianity, it spoke directly to my heart because I felt like an outcast growing up in Utah. And I was like, man, like this guy, this is what I believe. I believe that, man, like anybody, you know, like the guy hanging on the cross next to Jesus repents right before he dies, and Jesus is like, hey, you're going to be with me in eternity. Like all you have to do is believe. There's something so beautiful to me about that story. And the final caveat in that is just anyone that says they know for sure what's going on in the spiritual realm is a fucking liar. Like, I think we all just need to like put that on the table. Like anybody that says their religion is true or they're like there is no way to prove that. So like let's just put that, like we're all living by faith to some degree. Like unless you've died and come back, there is an element of your faith. And even if you're an atheist or an agnostic, that takes equal amount to believe that when you die you just close your eyes and everything goes black. That it takes an equal amount of faith to believe that as it does for me to believe that when I die something else happens, right? Because neither of us know. Neither of us know that what actually is going to go on when we die. But adversely, what we believe happens when we die can actually change our behavior in life. And I think that that's where this conversation becomes really important. And so there is not a consensus on what Christianity actually is and what it looks like. And so when we talk about the term Christian nationalism, I think we need to be, I think there is, I think we need to be careful because there are really beautiful faith driven sections of Christianity that I think are doing amazing things throughout the world that most people will probably never hear about. And then there's the most vocal people that are using Christianity as a, you know, as a tool, as a hammer to instate whatever they believe is their justice on the world. And I think that that's what we're seeing in our political world. So I guess, okay, so that out of the way, I'm curious what your thoughts are as far as like, how do you experience Christian nationalism and what's your take on it being Jewish?
Yeah, I mean, I think that was really well said, and a nice, a, a really great insight into someone who grew up in the environment that you did, exposed to a lot of different uh, religions in different extremes, in a sense. Um,
Yeah.
so, as a Jewish person, the idea of Christian nationalism scares the shit out of me. Uh, the idea of any like ardently theocratic government, frankly, scares the shit out of me. But you know, Christian nationalism, any religion, any government that is based openly and fully on the dictates of a particular religion is not going to be welcoming of other religions. And the story of Jews throughout history is the story of people who stay firm to their beliefs while being the minority population under governments that want them to convert and get really, really mad when they don't convert and fucking kill them, and then add in some conspiracy, or kick them out and add some conspiracy theories into it. And you have kind of two things that explain a lot of the history of Jews over the last 2,000 years, let's say. So, as a Jew, I hear Christian nationalism and I am like, I have an immediate allergic reaction to it. As a individual who, look, I think that the United States of America is the best country in the world. And I think that we have for 250 years now made work a system of democracy that has worked probably better, I don't know, than any other in the world. If for no other reason than for the last 100 years of it, we have agreed, or 150 years of it, we have agreed that slavery is bad, and almost every other society before then didn't feel that way. So if for no other reason than
Yeah.
that, we have uh, tried to create a system that recognizes people of all stripes, of all colors, of all faiths. And when you start to term our system as one that is a Christian nationalist system, you are taking that out. You're taking all of that out, whether it's right away or down the road. Uh, Now, so you mentioned that podcast Sam Harris did with Doug Wilson.
Yeah.
Doug Wilson is an important guy here because
Yeah,
he
we need to
is.
talk about him a lot because he's kind of the driving force behind a lot of what's going on right now.
Yeah, he is the head of probably the largest, self-avowed Christian nationalist church there is. I don't know what he calls it, but they have, I think, 100 or so different individual congregations, if that's the right word. And critically, Pete Hegseth is a member of one of them. And Pete Hegseth has had Doug Wilson hang out at the Pentagon. Pete Hegseth is very, very open about his Christian nationalism. And you have J.D. Vance, who I don't think is a Christian nationalist, but he's probably pretty darn close. And I certainly believe, would have no problem adopting a form of Christian nationalism if it helped him. You have Mike
Yeah.
Huckabee, who is a Christian dispensationalist, which is, sort of cousins to Christian nationalism. You have all these people at the highest levels of our government who are self-avowed Christian nationalists or something very, very close to it. And Doug Wilson is their Pied Piper. He's kind of the guy that's laying out the rules for them to follow. So to hear him talk, I think both of us are going to reference a lot this interview we did back in November with Sam Harris, where he talks quite openly. Sam Harris, really good interviewer, and he gives him the space to describe what Christian nationalism is and what he believes and how this would work. Uh, so at least for me, I thought that was a really, really instructive interview. And Doug Wilson is certainly the guy that we need to be talking about if there's any guy that we need to be talking about.
Yeah, and I think it's important to say, okay, first, Doug Wilson is an incredibly knowledgeable guy. Like, I mean, the dude knows his Bible. So like there's no question about that. Like he studies, reads, so this isn't somebody that just takes something out of context. This is somebody that understands the whole landscape of the Bible incredibly well, and very much has picked what he thinks is the most critical aspects. And a couple of things that came up that I think are important for us to understand is one, Doug Wilson does not believe that there should be anybody that has any same-sex interactions, anything. So any LGBTQ rights, even like just anything involving it. Like that sodomy should be punishable by law. This is a very Christian nationalism point of view. This is not what I believe to be a Christian point of view, but it's a Christian nationalism point of view. It's also a Christian national point of view that women that the he said it this way. He doesn't believe in suppressing female votes, but he believes every vote should be held as a household. So like, which is just another form of suppression, which is interesting. And so in that,
Also, explicitly with the male's voice being kind of the tiebreaker.
correct. Yeah. Meaning like So the only instance where he believes that a woman should vote is an instance where she has been widowed or she's living on her own and doesn't have a male counterpart yet. And again, he doesn't believe that lesbians should exist. So like you're not gonna if there's
They're
a
not a member
household
of
with
a,
two women, yeah, you
they're not a
wouldn't
member of
be.
his society.
Yes, they would be outcast. And so intermingled in all of this, this is there's some serious policy ramifications. And one of the things he brought up too is they don't believe in public schooling. They don't believe that school, which this ties into our conversation from last week, and what ultimately the driving force behind the school voucher program is these Christian nationalist billionaire donors that are running these mega churches, and they will happily tank the public schooling system to force a private Christian schooling setup on the state of Texas at some point. So the first step is to, do your best to eliminate public schools as much as possible, and they've effectively done that. The voucher program is gutting budgets. AISD was 180 million short, and dude, honestly, reading these emails of them trying to overcome these shortfalls is heartbreaking. It's really awful. We were at a football fundraiser for Bowie High School yesterday, and they were basically like, "Yeah, we're going to need a lot of help because our funding is getting cut significantly. We need help to feed the kids. We're going to need help with equipment. We need help with and it's just insane, man. It's insane that this kind of idealism and this kind of um, Christian nationalism in this form is not what actual Christianity is about, in my opinion. Like we've actually talked about this in terms of Republicans and Democrats right now, but I think one of the reasons I probably am more attracted to progressive views at the moment is because my view of Christianity was that when Jesus was hanging on the cross and he looked out and he was like, God, forgive them. They don't know what they're doing. He was talking about everybody, that everybody is equal and has equal rights, and it doesn't matter. He didn't say like, God, forgive all of the people that believe the same thing, or forgive all the white people, or forgive all the, like, it was everybody. And Christianity was meant to be inclusive on the bounds of love and care for one another. And so in this system, if you're claiming it to be a Christian system, it should be more inclusive. It should be more loving towards the people in poverty. It should be more caring towards offering free meals for kids that need it. Like, if this was actually what Christianity, if Christian nationalism was actually Christian, it would look far more progressive than it does Democrat right now, or than it does Republican right now in our system.
Yeah, I mean, I think what's important is, and you referenced this earlier, is like there are 1,000 different ways to interpret the Bible.
Mhm.
There's a whole second liturgy in Judaism, the Talmud, which is basically people trying to figure out how to interpret the Torah, how to answer the questions posed in the Torah, and these things change over time, uh, and it doesn't take much to see that. I don't know, I think you would agree, they have to change over time, right? You can't, you can't live in 2026 under a set of laws handed down, through a covenant on Mount Sinai 4,000 years ago or whatever thousand years ago.
Oh,
You know,
absolutely. Like all of this stuff should actually progress towards the time, which is, I think it was actually, I think the book was written for I think the Bible was actually written for that, but continue, because I'll jump on that at the end or after you're done talking.
yeah. So, I mean, the thing about Christian nationalism is it doesn't, the debate about what does Christianity actually mean, actually say, is, I think, secondary. Or if it's not secondary, it is certainly the cover for Christian nationalists to start. And when I was preparing for this, I listened to that interview, and it was the second time I listened to it, because when it came out, I was like, oh, I want to hear this. I know who this guy is. He's a fucking nut job. Uh,
Yeah.
and the second time through, I found it very, very interesting to sort of hear how he begins, the point at which Doug Wilson begins to justify Christian nationalism. And I thought it was interesting because we alluded to this last week, and with voter ID, like, what's the common point? What's the point of commonality that probably we could all agree on, that he will then take and incrementally lead people to a place that doesn't seem obvious from that point of commonality. And that point of commonality where he begins, and which I agree, is that we all entities, legal and human, have some moral agency. You and I have moral agency in our daily lives. My company, your business as a realtor, your brokerage, they have moral agency in what they do. Our governments have moral agency at the federal, state, and local level. We are all responsible for what we do, right? The question then, so we can all, I feel like we could all agree on that. That doesn't seem too controversial. So the question is, okay, where do you derive those morals? Where do you get that from? It's like, okay, well, you can get them from your parents, you can get them from a lot of places, and you can absolutely get them from religious text. As a race of humans, right, as a species, we have derived moral guidance from religious texts for thousands of years. This is not anything new, and probably it's a net good. Okay, so you can say, okay, well, we're going to look heavily on religious texts. And then you start to, right? He's like, okay, we're not that far apart, me and Doug Wilson up to there. And then he's like, okay, well, if we look heavily, well, here's the text that I use here. And then you start to see the progression, right? And the slight explanation away where, in cases of of same-sex marriage, of same-sex relationships, and of sodomy, right? The punishment in the Bible is stoning by death, adultery as well. The punishment is death by
Yeah.
stoning, right? And so he says, well, that's a maximalist position. I'm not going to get right there. We're not going to go right there. There's a whole other set of wrongs that exist in this world that exist way before we get there. That there's
Yeah, but
furries. Go
yeah,
ahead.
this part of the conversation was super interesting to me because this is the shit that I've dealt with growing up in Utah and Mormon culture my whole life. And it drove me crazy because when he started talking about polygamy, he started talking about sodomy, and sodomy being oral or anal, like all of these things. And he was talking about how, like, in the secular world, or like in, unmarried relationships, all of these are bad. But then he asked him, well, inside of marriage, this is bad too. But he he immediately got on his heels when he talked about inside of a marriage bond between a man and a woman. How are these? He's like, well, we wouldn't necessarily be like, as like, this is not something we're going to go hunt people down to like find out if they're doing. And I was like, there it is. This is what their problem is. These are men that want to play pretend with values that they supposedly have and instate those values on people that they potentially don't like. But inside of their own home, they want to be able to do those things. So all of those men want to be able to have anal and oral and do all the things that they want to do in the bedroom without guilt free. But what they don't want to do is they don't want to just openly allow anybody else to do it, or they want to use it as a means of hate against somebody that they don't like. And that was evidently clear in that interview. And this is the hypocrisy of Christian nationalism.
See, I went across that one a little differently. I don't think you're wrong. To me, that was the pitch. That was the give, right? That was the acknowledgement that, yeah, no, of course we're not going to death by stoning. We're not going to get there right away, but
Yeah, like
so like,
100 years
right? He's
until
like,
we'll start
no,
stoning people again.
like, because what he says is he doesn't say it's okay in the house. He says, I'm not really worried about it in the house. I'm
Yep.
worried about all these other major things, right? And he goes back and he's like, for the last 20 years, we've had this explosion of, acceptance of same-sex couples. And he refers to furries and all these things where he's like, we've gone so far away from any sort of, uh, thing that's discussed in the Bible, that talking about the actual punishment, the actual what the Bible actually says, it's like, Yeah, no, we'll get there. We'll get there in 10 years. We'll get there in 20 years. But in the first 10 years, the first thing we're going to do is abolish same-sex marriage, right? That's a legal construct that we can simply abolish. And we're going to abolish public schools. So we're going to have private schools teaching this stuff. And, if your kid wants to, talk back to the mom, a little bit of talking back is not punishable by death, but, you know, he never, but the thing is, he always gets there. They're always
Mhm.
going to get there, right? Like, and Sam Harris was pretty good at drawing that out. He was like, yeah, but at some point, if your kid is, out there practicing, as an atheist and practicing yoga and gay and doing all these things and talking back to the parents, like eventually you, Doug Wilson, you're not arguing with the fact that that punishment exists and is an option. And
Yep.
Doug Wilson was like, no, I'm not arguing with that. So like it's all these incremental steps where each one can sound reasonable depending on where you fall on the spectrum and how closely you read, in this case, the Bible. And by the time you get close to the worst part, you're already so far down the line that the worst part starts to seem more reasonable, right? That's how these things work. It's a
Yes.
pitch. It's a sales pitch. If you're selling a house, right? Or when I was selling legal subscriptions, you find something that everybody can agree is a problem. Your house is too small. You had two kids. Now you have three kids. You used to have one. You need an extra bedroom. You need more square footage. You want to move to a better school. My legal research product is better. Blah, blah, blah. You're still using books. It's too slow. You find a common problem and you tailor your solution, your explanation of the solution to solve that problem. And that's all he's doing, right? And that's what terrifies me about it, because the solution, if you just stop listening and go back to your first instinct, or for me, if I go back to my first instinct that this is bad, this cannot be good, right? These things always end poorly for people who are not true believers. Eventually you get there. And Doug
Yeah.
Wilson will say it'll take 100, 150 years to get there. He'll say it's very incremental. We're not going to get there right away. And he might not say we're going to get there, but when asked, are we going to get there? He's not going to deny it, right?
Yep.
He's not going to deny that adulterers can be stoned to death. And he's not going to deny that same-sex couples, first, they're going to be outcast, awful to begin with. Then next, they're going to be stoned. So it's all just cover
Well, and
when he
there,
talks.
there, yeah, exactly. And there, like the part about slavery was interesting to me too, because he was talking about, like, he doesn't condone kidnapping or killing. So a lot of the American slave trade, he was like, I can honestly, say that that was egregious and a terrible offense and, would have no part in, but, being a slave owner, there's parts of the Bible that talk about being a slave owner and how you're supposed to treat your slave and how a slave should treat his master. And it's interesting
Explicitly
because
approved by the Bible.
explicitly approved by the Bible. And to me, like, this conversation always needs context too, because, okay, so one, at the time, Rome was a completely different culture. Slavery was rampant, and just about everybody with any kind of wealth had slaves. There was also a world in this culture too where people would sell themselves into slavery. So at the time, culturally, people that were very poor or had come on hard times, they would sell themselves to into slavery, which was basically like, hey, I'm going to work for this job, but it usually had a start and an end, right? Like it would be like a 15-year period where you were considered a slave, you worked on a property and, on a farm, wine field, something like that, but there was conditions for it, right? There was oftentimes like there was an out at the end. So the context within the Bible when it came to slavery was not one, it as I've read it, not one where I was like that it was like, man, we condone this, or this was something that should be propped up as something that should be useful in life. It was speaking to the conditions that were already currently happening and basically saying, look, if you subscribe to Christianity, like, if and you have slaves, you treat your slaves this way. Like you treat them with humanity. Like it was at the time still something very radical, but not something that was culturally going to shift anything, because slavery didn't end for, thousands of years later. I mean, even if you consider it ended today. So, but all that to be said is everything that he talks about, if you talk about it in like a general sense where everybody's on the same page and it's all happening in a lovingly way, it doesn't sound that egregious. If you talk about any of these things in a way where we go back to that conversation I had at the start of this, where the Christian is not somebody that actually has a relationship with God and love flowing out of them, the Christian that in it, the subject Christian is somebody that's performative, that is just living a Christian life by the rule book, but actually has no relationship with God. This is where these kind of policies become tyrannical and hateful, because these are the people that take slaves, treat them poorly, oppress women, oppress minorities, and you do it all in the name of Christ, because they're terrible fucking humans and they're missing the most important part, which is love. And so there is Christian nationalism does not work in this context. Like if you cannot live the and it was never meant to be either. Like the Bible was not meant to be a diagram for government. It was meant to be a diagram for individual values. That's really what it was.
Yeah, but I think I think that you're overthinking what Christian nationalism purports to be. He says he says, I love the separation of church and state. I love the First Amendment. I don't think that the government should be involved that much in matters of religion. He basically thinks that they should be offloading that stuff to, I don't know, churches, I suppose, right? He said, I would have a vice squad going around searching for that stuff. The slavery, and I think where I disagree with you is I don't think Christian nationalists ask the question, is this right or just? Because it is right and just, because it was said by Jesus, and Jesus is the Son of God. That makes it right and just, period. There is no additional layer of analysis that goes on to it. And that slavery conversation he had, to me, was fascinating, because it was the one place where Doug Wilson really had to work, right? He really had to work to find a way to say that no, slavery would not be okay under my Christian nationalist system. He's like, well, if you look at what Marx said, he does a bunch of what you just
Yeah,
referred to, which is like those were just the times. He's like, there's this letter to Ephesius or whatever, some Philomenus, whatever. I never fucking heard of it. He talks about it for 10
yeah,
minutes, right? But he is really, really working to piece together a little bit from here and a little bit from there and another little bit from another place to put it all together to make the case that this system, which was in place and explicitly approved in the Bible, because it was a product of the times, yes, but still explicitly approved in the Bible, would not be explicitly approved. And the reason he has to do that is because he knows there's no moral quarter. You can't go in and say like, yeah, no, the Bible, they had slaves, and yes, they had rules for how to, work with those slaves and how to treat them justly, but they had slaves. And if they had slaves in 2026, we can have slaves under a Christian nationalist government. He knows he can't say that. It was the
yeah,
one place where he was really scrambling, right? Where I was listening, I'm like, oh man, this guy, he has really put in some time to
yeah,
craft an argument within his reading of the Bible that would say what he wants it to say, because to me, he knows that there's plenty of people who don't agree with same-sex marriage, right? There's
yeah.
plenty of people who agree with, a strong nuclear family, and there's probably plenty of people who agree with household voting and all this other shit. But man, you start saying slavery's okay, and you're going to lose a lot of people. You're like, no, it's not. What are you, fucking crazy? Uh, so
Well,
to me, but to me, that's the crux of the Christian nationalists, right? They are looking back at what the Bible says, and they're saying this is how society should be run. This is the moral code. This is where we derive our moral agency, and we are not allowed to deviate from it, because how can you deviate from the word of Christ? How can you layer the experiences of other cultures and other people and thousands of years onto the word of Christ? The word of Christ is inviolate. And that's what's so scary to me, because that is the same shit that the crazy ass regimes in Iran and Syria do, just on top of a different religion. We know
Yeah.
how this ends.
Yeah. Well, and I'll land the ship here because I think this is a important aspect of it. So, the if I had coined the phrase Christian nationalism, what that would mean would be the utter acceptance of minorities, women, that everybody had equal rights. It would mean that we tax the rich, that we give to the poor, that we set up that nobody goes hungry, that public education and healthcare, that everybody has a right to these things. This is what real Christianity to me looks like. This was the person that Jesus is. Jesus, if you actually read the Bible and you read it in context with what was going on, what he was saying was radical in the sense that what he was actually challenging people most of the time to do was to step beyond their construct of what their life currently looked like and love people that didn't look and sound and were like them, that had different skin colors, that had different backgrounds. What he was saying is they had different income levels. And honestly, the income level is one of the biggest fights. You know, when people came to Jesus and was like, what do I have to do to get to heaven? He was like, sell everything. It wasn't 10% tithe. It was sell it all. Sell it all and give it away, because I can see what's in your heart, and what's in your heart is greed. And if you're struggling with greed and you're asking me that question, the only way to actually to pluck that greed out of your heart is to sell it all. Like, one person could give 10%, but you, motherfucker, have to give it all away, or that greed is going to run you into the ground and put you in hell. And that to me is what Christian nationalism, if it was actually Christian, would look like. But anybody that's coining the word Christian into a phrase, and they're using that to hate Jewish people, to hate minorities, to oppress women, to hate LGBTQ people, to launder money to the wealthy, then what I will tell you is that these are the people that Jesus would be flipping tables over and be screaming at and being like, guess what? You're missing it, because that's not what we're here for. And so all that to be said is, you know, I hate that the term Christianity gets lumped in with these people, because I don't believe that it's at the heart of what real Christianity is. So, uh, all these people that claim Christian nationalism and hate Jewish people, hate minorities, and want to force their beliefs on other people, you're not a fucking Christian, and stop claiming it, because I want no part of it. So,
Yeah,
and if I
and
have to call my something else, I will.
I'll tell you the thing that scares me as a Jew is not that they hate Jews. It's that Jews don't have a place in their end times. Jews don't have a place in their world. It doesn't. At some point, it comes down to a question of, you're a true believer or you're not. And if I'm a Jew, I'm not a true believer. And that's not hatred. That is cold calculus. And that's even worse.
Agreed. But what I do think that I do think that love, justice, I have to believe that the actual values of the Bible, inclusion, love, caring, equality, that ultimately that those things are worth fighting for, and that the people that are fighting for those things have a reason to fight. But if you're fighting to just oppress people, if you're fighting over hate, your reason to fight is not nearly as strong, and ultimately you end up losing. And I think that the reason we're at where we're at is that these values are actually worth living and fighting for. And I hope that the future of our country gets back to that to some degree.
Yeah,
So,
it's a really interesting endpoint, because it's not hate. I don't think this is a movement of hate. I don't think Christian nationalism is a movement of hate, and that's what worries me. I think it's a movement of strict biblical interpretation that allows for no quarter, and I would be in that part that's not allowed. And it's not. You can't argue with hate, but you can argue even less with someone who's a true believer, who says, you don't belong in my belief system.
Yeah.
You have to get out. Period. Like there's no emotion. It's just fact. And that's terrifying to me.
Yeah. Well, hopefully you understand that this is a very small section of what
Yep.
Christianity actually is, that there is a lot more Christians in the world that believe, I think, more the way I look at things than I would think. I would think anybody that actually read the life of Jesus and Paul and what their stories actually looked like and who they were talking to would hopefully decipher or take away from that the values that I hold from my Christianity and not to hold what they hold of them. I think Jesus was actually doing exactly what we talk about often, which was expanding rights of people, caring and loving for people, including more and more people, not excluding. And
I do
if
feel that way.
so, well, who we telling to shut the fuck up today, Owen?
You, Derek Peterson, shut the fuck up. Fucking Derek Peterson went to the University of Michigan this weekend, got up and gave a speech where he said in the Middle Eastern conflict, there is only one party that is just and historically justified, and it's the Palestinians. And I can't fucking believe that you, Derek, wait. Oh, it wasn't you. Oh,
I've
it was
not
another
been in
Derek
Michigan for a while.
Peterson. It was dean of faculty at University of Michigan, Derek Peterson. Shit, sorry, they spell their names the same way as you.
No, they
So
spell their names the exact same way. So yes, this is not great for me at the moment.
anyway, that Derek Peterson can shut the fuck up, because no, you do not get to stand up in front of 70,000 people and say this debate that has not been settled for thousands of years has now been settled because you feel like that, and that there is no discussion to be had, which is basically what he said. Like, get the fuck out of here with all of that. You're the faculty dean at a university, at one of the top universities. Discussion and debate and dialogue and discourse is your job. Fostering that is your job. Hiring people across the ideological spectrum is your job. To say that there is only one right answer is anathema to the thing that you're probably paid an awful lot of money and hold an awful lot of power to do. So you should shut the fuck up, not before you speak, Derek Peterson, but University of Michigan, Derek Peterson. And change your name
Yeah.
to the bad Derek Peterson while you're at it, you piece of shit.
Yeah. Change it to Derrick, Drrick, you asshole.
Yeah, and
I don't
Peterson
wanna,
with a D.
Yeah, Pedersen, dickhead. No, I logged into. I learned about this whole thing because people were tagging me in Facebook comments as they were yelling about shit. I was like, hey, how did I catch a stray for this? But turns out it was just another Derek Peterson that spells his name the exact same way that I do. So, well, yeah. So fuck that
problem
guy.
I don't have to worry about in all likelihood.
Yes. If I ever meet another Elwyn Hutter, I will be floored. And will immediately call you. So,
yeah.
Well, what are we talking about next week?
Oh, did we have something? I feel like there was something in the offing.
Is there a Jewish nationalism conversation we need to have?
There, a little bit there is, but I don't think we need to have it. Let's see what's in the notes. Yeah, kind of a little bit there is. Checking the notes.
I think maybe, there's a couple things I would like to discuss. It's going to require a little more research on our part. We can discuss a little bit further offline, but I would love to have a conversation, a few conversations about our military. One, about what it actually looks like to be in the military nowadays. But two, I think probably the conversation that we would be more equipped to have is where the military gets its money, how much it actually costs to run the military, and what that looks like for us as taxpayers, and how we can, and if we choose not to, try not to support certain things. So that could be an interesting conversation, or
Let's do it.
some form of that. So
Let's do it.
be interesting, because we may be running up against some of this stuff. This Iran war may end up going on for another 30 years. So
Gas will be $7 a gallon by the time we do this that next episode.
it might be. God, dude, my car is so bad too. It costs me like $90 a week right now to fill up my car, and I drive so much and I hate it. So one day I'll get a Rivian. We'll see. But
That's right.
All right.
Rivian.
Yeah.
All right.
See y'all next week.